In the quiet town of Rockford, a traffic stop was supposed to be routine. But for one man, it became a public humiliation. A black man in a suit, a smirking officer, and a decision made not on law, but on assumption. What the officer didn't know, what the world was about to find out, was that the man he arrested wasn't just anybody. He was an FBI agent. Before we dive into this powerful story, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us create more stories that open eyes, stir hearts, and spark change. Now let's begin the story. Rockford was the kind of town that looked peaceful on the surface. Its tree-lined streets were quiet, its storefronts tidy, and neighbors still waved from across their lawns. But beneath the warm smiles and polite greetings lay something colder, unspoken bias, deeply rooted, waiting for the right moment to emerge. In a modest colonial-style home on the east side, Derrick Langston adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. His suit was sharp but not flashy, his shoes polished, his face calm. To anyone passing by, he was just a well-dressed black man heading to work. But Derrick lived a double life. To his neighbors, he was simply the husband of Janelle Langston, a prominent civil rights attorney known for taking on discrimination cases across the state. Together, they were seen as successful, quiet, and respectable. What no one knew, not even Janelle in full, was that Derrick was a senior field agent for the FBI, currently embedded in a high-stakes undercover mission. For the past 6 months, he had been quietly gathering intel on an illegal weapons ring suspected of operating with help from local officials. As he slipped on his jacket, Janelle entered the room with 2 cups of tea. "Another out-of-town meeting?" she asked gently. Derrick smiled, taking the cup. "Just a quick check-in. Shouldn't be too late." She kissed him on the cheek, but her eyes held concern. She was used to his strange hours, but something in her still worried every time he walked out the door. Derrick stepped outside and got into his old black SUV, unremarkable, intentionally plain. Under the driver's seat was a hidden case containing his FBI credentials and a loaded firearm. But today he wouldn't need them. He was headed to meet a confidential informant just outside of town. The streets of Rockford were calm that morning, the radio low in the background. Derrick's focus was sharp, his mind already on the information he was about to receive. If the intel was accurate, it could unravel the entire operation. What he didn't know was that 2 blocks ahead, near an old gas station, sat a patrol cruiser with its engine idling. Inside was Officer Nick Barrows, a cop with a strong jawline, mirrored sunglasses, and a reputation for being tough on trouble, which in Rockford often meant anyone who didn't look like they belonged. Barrows sipped his coffee lazily as Derrick's SUV passed. He narrowed his eyes. Well-dressed black man. Expensive-looking watch. Wrong part of town. In his mind it all added up. Barrows tossed his coffee cup to the floor, turned on his lights, and pulled out onto the street. Derrick glanced into his rearview mirror as red and blue lights flashed behind him. He exhaled. He pulled over. And in that quiet, controlled moment he already knew. This wasn't about the law. This was about what he looked like. The patrol cruiser's siren died as Derrick pulled over to the side of the road, just beneath the shadow of an old sycamore tree. The early morning sun filtered through its leaves, casting broken patterns across the windshield. Derrick turned off the engine and placed both hands on the steering wheel, calm, visible, deliberate. He had done this before. Too many times. As a black man, even in a tailored suit, he knew that caution was survival. He glanced briefly into the rearview mirror. Officer Nick Barrows approached with the kind of swagger reserved for someone who believed he owned the road. His sunglasses reflected the morning light, but not enough to hide the scorn in his eyes. Barrows rapped on the window. Derrick rolled it down slowly. "License and registration," Barrows said flatly, without greeting, without explanation. Derrick nodded, keeping his voice steady. "Sure, officer. It's in the glove box. May I?" Barrows gave a half nod but kept his hand near his holster. Derrick moved slowly, retrieved the documents, and handed them over. Barrows barely glanced at them before asking, "What are you doing in this part of town?" "I live here," Derrick replied evenly. Barrows raised an eyebrow. "Ridgewood." "That's right. With my wife." Barrows snorted, a smug smile forming. "You don't look like a Ridgewood man." Derrick didn't react. Barrows stepped back and motioned. "Out of the vehicle. Now." Derrick's pulse didn't spike. His training kept him grounded. Still, every second felt like walking a razor's edge. He stepped out slowly. Hands still visible. Without another word, Barrows turned him around and snapped on the handcuffs. Derrick's wrists tightened under the cold steel. "Am I under arrest?" he asked. Barrows chuckled. "You're being detained until I figure out what your story really is." A few cars passed. A teenager on a bike slowed down. A couple standing outside a nearby cafe began to take notice. One pulled out a phone, hit record. Derrick stood silently beside the cruiser, hands bound behind him, jacket slightly pulled open from the rough handling. And there it was, just for a second. A glint of silver from his inner lapel. His badge. The teenager holding the phone zoomed in. "Yo," he whispered to his friend, "is that?" The friend's eyes widened. "Dude, upload it. Like now." Officer Barrows didn't notice. He was too busy talking down to Derrick, too proud of what he thought was another catch. But in a matter of minutes, that video would be seen by thousands. And in less than an hour, it would reach Washington. The metal door of the Rockford Police Department creaked open as Officer Barrows led Derrick inside, still handcuffed. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Officers glanced up from their desks, barely interested. Barrows smirked as he passed the front desk. "Picked up a real smooth talker today," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. No one asked what the charge was. No one checked the paperwork. Derrick sat in the interrogation room, hands still cuffed, jaw set, expression unreadable. The room was cold and sterile. Just a table, 2 chairs, and the faint hum of a vent. Barrows leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So what are you? Lawyer? Real estate guy? You dress too clean to be running game." Silence. Barrows walked around the table like a cat circling prey. "You know what your problem is?" he said, voice growing cocky. "You think that suit makes you someone. But I've seen 100 guys like you. Same act. Same lies." He sat down across from Derrick, slapped the ID and registration on the table. "Everything looks clean. Almost too clean," he said, laughing under his breath. "You people get smarter every year." Derrick looked him in the eye. "You're making a mistake." Barrows leaned in, sneering. "And you're making this worse for yourself." From the hallway, a young officer knocked softly and stepped in. Officer Barrows, there's a call for you." "Line 2. They said it's urgent." Barrows waved him off. "They can wait." The officer hesitated. "Sir, it's from Washington." Barrows froze. He stood up slowly and walked out of the room, his heart beginning to thump harder in his chest. He picked up the phone in the admin office. "This is Barrows." A cold voice answered. "This is Agent Mark Givens with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You currently have Special Agent Derrick Langston in your custody." Barrows swallowed hard. "Wait, what?" "That man is part of an active undercover operation. You've just jeopardized months of federal surveillance. Remove the cuffs. Now." Barrows' hand trembled as he slowly hung up the phone. He turned around and looked through the glass window into the interrogation room. Derrick sat calmly as if he had been waiting for this moment. Barrows opened the door, the cockiness completely drained from his voice. "Agent Langston." "I didn't know." Derrick stood, his gaze cold and unwavering. "You didn't want to know." Barrows reached for the cuffs, fumbling as he unlocked them. The cuffs fell with a loud metallic clink onto the floor. Just as Barrows stepped back, the door burst open. Agent Mark Givens entered with 2 federal officers. His presence was unmistakable, calm, sharp, and commanding. "Step away from him, Barrows," he said flatly. "You're done." Barrows stood there wordless. Derrick adjusted his suit jacket, turned to Givens, and with a calm voice said, "Thanks for coming." Then he glanced one last time at Barrows. "You laughed. But the badge doesn't care about your assumptions." The video hit the internet like a wildfire. A well-dressed black man, handcuffed by a grinning white officer, trying to stay calm as he's pushed into the back of a patrol car. Then the glint of a federal badge. The moment of realization. The shift in power. All captured by a teenager with a steady hand and quick fingers. Within hours, the footage had racked up over 2 million views. The hashtags began trending. Hashtag Agent Langston. Hashtag Profiling Power. Hashtag FBI All Black. News outlets were calling it one of the most public examples of racial profiling against a federal agent in recent memory. Rockford's mayor called for an emergency press briefing. The FBI issued a statement, confirming Agent Derrick Langston's identity and condemning the incident. The pressure mounted on the local department, and the phones inside Rockford PD rang nonstop, journalists, lawyers, protesters. Inside his office, Captain Olivia Barnes, the department's commanding officer, stood facing the window, her jaw clenched as she read the preliminary incident report. "I told them," she muttered, "Barrows is a lawsuit waiting to happen." Behind her, Agent Mark Givens sat silently. "It's more than that now," he said. "This isn't just bad policing. It's federal obstruction." Captain Barnes turned, her eyes tired. "What happens next?" Mark stood up. "I'm not here to punish the department. But Barrows, he crossed a line. And everyone saw it." Meanwhile, Derrick Langston sat quietly at home, watching his name spiral through the media. His phone vibrated nonstop. Reporters, lawyers, even government officials asking for statements. But he said nothing. Not yet. Janelle sat beside him, scrolling through her feed, reading every comment, every opinion, every accusation. "You knew this would go public," she said. Derrick nodded. "I just didn't expect it to blow up this fast." "You're not just a man now," she whispered. "You're a symbol." Derrick looked out the window, watching as a small crowd of supporters began to gather on their street. Signs were being held. Chants were starting. It was no longer about just one traffic stop. It was about everyone that never made the news. And still, Barrows hadn't even issued an apology. Because deep down he didn't think he'd done anything wrong. But the world was about to remind him. His silence would cost him more than his badge. The press conference was scheduled for noon, but by 10 a.m. the courthouse plaza was already packed. News vans lined the street, their antennas raised like steel trees. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Police officers in formal uniforms formed a perimeter. And right at the center, a podium stood waiting under the hot sun. Derrick Langston hadn't spoken publicly since the incident. Until now. He stood behind the courthouse doors, adjusting his jacket. His FBI badge was clipped plainly to his waist. No longer hidden. No longer in the shadows. Beside him, his wife Janelle gave a quiet nod, her expression calm but fierce. Agent Mark Givens joined them, offering a reassuring look. "Say it your way," he said. "The world's listening now." When Derrick stepped out into the sunlight, a wave of cameras flashed. The crowd hushed. Microphones pushed forward. He took a moment, a long breath. Then he spoke. "My name is Special Agent Derrick Langston of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I was unlawfully detained, handcuffed, and humiliated on the streets of the very town I swore to protect. Not because I broke a law, but because I fit a description someone created in their mind." A ripple moved through the crowd. "I didn't come here to shame a single officer. This is not about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about the many men and women who don't wear badges but live with fear every time red and blue lights appear in their rearview mirror." He looked directly into one of the cameras. "This isn't just about me. It never was. It's about everyone who gets treated like a suspect before they're seen as a person." The crowd erupted in applause. Some clapped slowly, some with tears in their eyes. Reporters shouted questions, but Derrick stepped back from the podium. He'd said what needed to be said. Back inside, Captain Barnes watched the entire speech on a small monitor in her office. Her face was unreadable. Behind her, a file sat on her desk with Nick Barrows typed in bold on the cover. It had already been signed. Immediate suspension. Recommendation for permanent removal. Because now, everyone saw what happened when a man with power abused it. And what happened when a man with purpose stood tall. The precinct was silent when Officer Nick Barrows arrived that morning. Not the usual greetings, no smirks, no inside jokes. Just cold stares and quiet whispers that stopped the moment he passed. He walked to his locker, trying to ignore the TV playing in the break room. FBI agent speaks out after wrongful arrest, demands reform. His own face was everywhere now. Frozen in time on camera, laughing while Derrick Langston sat in handcuffs. The badge on his chest felt heavier than ever, no longer a symbol of authority but of disgrace. When he opened his locker, a white envelope rested on the top shelf. Internal Affairs. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. Suspension. Immediate. Pending investigation. As he sat down at his desk, Captain Barnes approached with two other officers. Her face was calm but cold. "Nick," she said quietly, "we need your badge and your weapon." Barrows looked up. Just like that. Captain Barnes didn't flinch. Just like that. He unpinned the badge from his chest. It clicked softly against the desk. His sidearm followed. "You know I didn't know who he was," he said, voice defensive. But you knew what he looked like, she replied. And that was enough for you. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Barrows didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. Outside, a small protest had gathered on the steps of the precinct. Signs with Derrick Langston's name. Others with names of people no one had ever heard of, but who had lived similar stories. Derrick watched from a distance, standing beside Janelle and Agent Givens. He didn't need to be at the center of it. His words had already done their part. His silence now was more powerful than shouting. A young black boy in the crowd pointed toward him and whispered to his father, "That's the agent?" His father smiled. "Yeah. That's the one who made them listen." 6 months later, the name Derrick Langston was no longer just tied to a viral video or a scandal. It had become a symbol of what law enforcement could look like, of integrity, restraint, and reform. The FBI had reassigned Derrick, not to a field mission, but to a leadership position no less important. He now stood at the front of a lecture hall at Quantico, leading a course titled Bias Recognition in Law Enforcement. The room was filled with cadets in uniform, young and idealistic. Some nervous, some skeptical. Derrick scanned the room and spoke clearly. "You won't stop being human when you put on that badge," he said. "But what matters is whether you let your fears speak louder than your training, louder than your judgment." On the wall behind him was a projected image. Not a badge. Not a gun. A single still frame from the video. Derrick, standing handcuffed beside a patrol car. It was a reminder, to them and to himself, of where unchecked bias can lead and how one moment can either destroy or define a career. Later that day, as he left the academy building, he found a letter waiting in his mailbox. No return address. Inside was a folded page. Written in uneven handwriting. "I saw what happened. I'm going to the academy next year. I want to be better than what they were to you. Thank you. JD, age 17. Derrick smiled softly. He didn't need applause. He didn't need revenge. He just needed one person to think differently. Because some badges are earned by rank. Others by courage. And Derrick Langston wore both. Moral message and life lesson. A badge may grant power, but it doesn't define character. This story teaches us that respect, justice, and integrity must come before authority. Derrick Langston showed that true strength lies not in how loud you speak, but in how you stand firm when the world tries to silence you. He could have reacted with rage. Instead, he let the truth speak louder. His calm exposed arrogance. His restraint dismantled bias. And his purpose turned humiliation into change. We are reminded that prejudice, no matter how subtle, can destroy lives. But one man, one choice, and one moment of courage can begin the shift toward something better. Let us not wear power like armor. Let us carry it like responsibility.